In the early 1500s, the Kingdom of Poland was a land torn between noble power and royal weakness. The throne passed too often through compromise, leaving kings dependent on aristocrats who owned armies and controlled the countryside. Into this fractured realm rose a young noble named Władysław Korybut, whose ambition far exceeded his lineage. Guys, can you help me to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel? And it's my dream. Sorry for interruption. It's humble request. Let's jump into the video. Born to a minor count in Kraków, Władysław was educated in the principles of governance and warfare by Jesuit tutors. He learned Latin, studied Roman military strategies, and observed the failures of kings who allowed mercy to outweigh control. His early writings, preserved in fragments, reveal a mind obsessed with order and obedience. When civil unrest struck the southern provinces, Władysław gained recognition by restoring peace with a combination of negotiation and calculated violence. He punished rebellion, but rewarded loyalty with land and coin. His methods earned him both fear and respect among the nobles, who later supported his claim to the throne. In 1512, following the death of King Zygmunt II without a direct heir, the nobles gathered in Warsaw to elect a new monarch. Władysław's supporters portrayed him as the only man capable of restoring unity to a disordered realm. He secured the crown through political alliances, arranged marriages, and promises of reform that he never intended to keep. Once crowned, he declared himself protector of the Polish crown and restructured the royal court. He replaced long-standing advisors with military men loyal to his command. Taxes were standardized, and the royal treasury filled once more after decades of mismanagement. His first years brought visible stability that impressed foreign ambassadors. Władysław's reign was marked by relentless administrative reform. He divided the kingdom into 6 provinces, each overseen by royal inspectors. These inspectors reported directly to him, bypassing the noble councils that had long dictated regional policies. The nobility soon realized their autonomy was vanishing under a monarch who valued efficiency over tradition. His obsession with control extended beyond politics. Władysław established a network of informants within monasteries, markets, and military camps. Spies reported on whispers of dissent and unrest. He often quoted his own maxim, "A kingdom without fear is a field without fences." This phrase became the unofficial slogan of his rule. Foreign powers viewed him as unpredictable. The Teutonic Knights respected his strength but distrusted his motives. The Holy Roman Empire sought alliance through marriage, while the Ottoman Sultan observed from a distance, waiting for weakness. Władysław's letters to neighboring rulers were formal and brief, revealing a man who preferred power to diplomacy. His interest in weaponry and metallurgy led him to establish royal workshops in Kraków. Blacksmiths and artisans were ordered to design instruments of discipline for use within the army and prisons. While these devices were initially intended for punishment of deserters and traitors, they became symbols of his growing authoritarianism. Under his reign, the church also faced transformation. Władysław appointed bishops who supported royal authority over papal influence. He introduced the royal mandate, which required sermons to include praise of the monarch. Those who refused risked imprisonment. His insistence on loyalty within the clergy reinforced his belief that the kingdom must think and speak with one voice. Despite his rigid governance, Władysław maintained public favor by emphasizing national pride. He funded grand processions, built fortresses, and commissioned chronicles depicting Poland as a destined empire between East and West. His image was carefully crafted, stern yet just, merciless toward enemies but protective of loyal citizens. At court, his discipline was legendary. Servants operated in silence, and courtiers adhered to strict schedules. Meals were timed, gestures measured, and voices subdued. Every act of disobedience, no matter how small, was noted and punished. Yet he rewarded intelligence and loyalty, elevating common soldiers to noble rank if they demonstrated unquestioning service. By 1518, his power had reached a level unseen in Poland's history. The Sejm, once a body of debate and resistance, had become a ceremonial institution. Laws were enacted through royal decree, and dissenters disappeared quietly from public life. The term Iron Crown emerged among citizens, symbolizing his unbending rule. Władysław's fascination with control extended into justice. He believed that punishment should reflect moral order rather than simple retaliation. Criminals were not merely to suffer, but to serve as visible examples of royal authority. He often attended public executions and studied the reactions of the crowd. He viewed fear as an instrument of governance, not cruelty. Within the walls of his newly constructed fortress in Poznan, rumors spread about secret chambers and experimental devices. Artisans whispered of machines designed to test endurance and obedience. These stories circulated among commoners, feeding an image of the king as both reformer and tyrant. His personal life remained largely hidden. He married Queen Elżbieta of Pomerania for alliance rather than affection. The queen lived quietly, rarely appearing in public. Chroniclers noted that Władysław valued solitude and contemplation, often retreating into private study, where he reviewed military reports late into the night. By the early 1520s, Poland had become one of the most organized states in Central Europe. Roads were secure, trade routes reopened, and tax revenues doubled. Yet, behind this prosperity lay the growing machinery of surveillance and punishment. Every act of defiance was traced to its source, every rumor investigated. Foreign envoys described Władysław as a man of calculated calm, whose eyes betrayed neither anger nor mercy. He was said to pause before answering any question, as if measuring words for hidden threats. His court functioned with mathematical precision, reflecting his belief that human behavior could be disciplined like steel under heat. The construction of his new fortress at Toruń marked a turning point in his reign. It was built not as a military outpost, but as a symbol of royal supremacy. The fortress contained a central hall known as the Chamber of Justice, where Władysław personally presided over trials of treason. Few who entered ever returned. Historians later describe this period as the height of the Iron Order, an era when obedience replaced freedom and silence became a form of loyalty. The kingdom prospered materially, but suffered spiritually. The people revered their king, yet feared his gaze more than the wrath of foreign enemies. Władysław's policies reshaped Poland's identity. Under his rule, the monarchy evolved into a disciplined institution bound by regulation and punishment. To him, mercy was weakness and chaos was treason. What began as reform had become an obsession with control that extended into every corner of the realm. By 1524, Władysław stood unchallenged. His name inspired both admiration and terror. His court chroniclers praised him as the bringer of order, while others whispered that he had turned the kingdom into a living prison. Yet, to the king himself, it was a triumph of structure over anarchy, a perfection of rule he had long envisioned. The foundations of his later infamy were already laid. Within the fortress walls of Toruń, hidden from public view, stood the first designs of an instrument that would become his legacy, the Iron Cradle. But its story and the suffering it brought would emerge only in the years that followed. By 1525, King Władysław the Iron-Hearted ruled a nation that had become an extension of his will. His obsession with absolute control reached new depths when he began reforming the royal prisons. He believed that punishment must not only remove crime, but also teach obedience through pain. The prisons became laboratories of discipline where human endurance was measured against the limits of steel. The fortress at Toruń, once a symbol of justice, turned into the center of these experiments. Władysław appointed a royal engineer named Jan Dzierżonowski to oversee the construction of new instruments of correction. Dzierżonowski was a skilled blacksmith with a fascination for mechanics. Together, king and craftsman began developing devices meant to represent the order and precision of royal law. Władysław personally supervised their designs. He demanded that the instruments reflect not chaos or brutality, but geometry and balance. He argued that perfect order required perfect form, even in punishment. The result of their collaboration would later be known as Żelazna Kołyska, the Iron Cradle. The Iron Cradle was conceived not as a weapon of war, but as a tool of moral purification. Its structure resembled an infant's cradle, forged entirely of polished iron. The interior, however, was lined with thousands of short spikes, carefully measured to avoid instant death. It was built to embrace the body completely, pressing against the skin with uniform pressure when the cradle moved. To the king, the symbolism was deliberate. The cradle represented rebirth through suffering, a return to purity after sin. He called it the sleep of repentance, believing that those who endured its motion would die cleansed of guilt. In official records, the device was listed as an instrument of moral reformation. The first trials of the Iron Cradle took place in the dungeons beneath the fortress. The subjects were condemned soldiers who had betrayed their oaths. Władysław observed the experiments from a narrow gallery, recording every movement. He instructed the executioners to rock the cradle slowly, allowing the spikes to pierce but not kill immediately. The victims cried, then fell silent, and finally stopped moving. Reports from these sessions were meticulously documented. The royal physician noted how long the body could withstand motion before succumbing to blood loss and exhaustion. The king studied these notes, adjusting the angle of the cradle and the spacing of the spikes. His pursuit was not sadism, but precision. He wanted death to occur within a predictable period, measured by rhythm rather than chaos. In official correspondence, Władysław justified these practices as necessary to maintain order in the kingdom. He wrote to his council that punishment must reflect the structure of law, balanced, consistent, and inevitable. He rejected older forms of execution, such as burning or dismemberment, calling them barbaric and uncontrolled. The Iron Cradle, he insisted, was civilized justice. The fortress guards began referring to the dungeon as the Hall of Sleep. Prisoners taken there never returned. The silence surrounding the chamber became part of the kingdom's folklore. Peasants whispered that the cradle sang when rocked, producing a faint metallic hum. Some claimed the sound could be heard on quiet nights drifting over the Vistula River. Despite secrecy, word of the device reached foreign courts. Ambassadors from the Holy Roman Empire recorded rumors of a machine of mercy that kills without hatred. The Vatican expressed concern over Władysław's methods, but the king ignored papal letters. He believed divine judgment was best delivered through royal instruments, not distant clerics. Inside the kingdom, fear replaced resistance. Nobles who once plotted rebellion began professing loyalty. The threat of the cradle, though rarely seen, became an invisible weapon of governance. Władysław achieved through fear what diplomacy never could: unquestioned obedience. His obsession, however, deepened with time. He ordered the construction of multiple cradles, each refined with mechanical precision. Some included internal levers that allowed executioners to alter the motion. Others were fitted with sound chambers to amplify the creaking metal. The king demanded that each cradle bear the royal insignia, ensuring his authority was etched into every instrument. In 1527, a rebellion erupted in the province of Lublin. Local nobles refused to pay the new land tax imposed by royal decree. Władysław responded swiftly, sending an army led by his cousin, Count Kazimierz. The rebellion ended in days, but the captured leaders were brought to Torun for judgment. The king ordered that the first iron cradle be used publicly for the first time. The execution took place in the courtyard of the fortress. The condemned were laid inside the cradle, their bodies fitting perfectly within the curved frame. The device was rocked gently, producing a metallic rhythm that echoed across the walls. The crowd watched in silence as the victims' movements slowed and ceased. Władysław observed without emotion, noting the duration and consistency of the motion. Afterward, he declared the punishment a triumph of lawful order. He stated that the kingdom sleeps peacefully when its enemies sleep in justice. The statement was engraved on the walls of the fortress, solidifying the cradle's symbolic role in his rule. From that moment, the Iron Cradle became both a legend and a warning. The royal workshops continued to refine the device. Władysław encouraged innovation, offering gold to artisans who could make the design more efficient. Drawings preserved in archives show variations, some larger, others with adjustable sides. These improvements were recorded not as instruments of cruelty, but as advancements in the art of governance. The church grew increasingly uneasy. Bishops warned that such punishments risked divine condemnation, but Władysław countered that God himself ruled through fear and consequence. He reminded them that disobedience in heaven had brought eternal punishment, and thus order on earth required reflection of that truth. By the early 1530s, The Iron Cradle had become an institution. Each major fortress held one, guarded by soldiers sworn to secrecy. The devices were rarely used, but their presence maintained obedience across provinces. The knowledge that a single act of defiance could lead to the cradle ensured stability more effectively than armies. Yet even among his closest advisors, concern began to grow. Dzierżonowski, the engineer who had first built the device, recorded unease in his private journals. He wrote that the king no longer sought reform, but control for its own sake. He feared that reason had given way to obsession. His notes mention that Władysław ordered a new model, one capable of rocking automatically, without human touch. The completion of that final cradle marked the height of the king's fixation. It symbolized a system that required no human conscience, only mechanical precision. To Władysław, it represented the perfection of authority, punishment without passion, order without error. In those years, Poland stood firm and prosperous. Trade flourished, borders were secure, and rebellions ceased entirely. Yet beneath that surface of order, fear ran through every household. The cradle had become a silent presence in the national consciousness, a reminder that peace under Władysław was built upon iron and motion. What began as a reform of justice had turned into an instrument of ideology. The Iron Cradle was no longer a tool of punishment, but a symbol of the king's belief that suffering itself was the foundation of obedience. The seeds of his downfall were planted not in rebellion but in the perfection of his own creation. By 1533, King Władysław's rule stood at its absolute peak. The Iron Cradle had become a symbol carved into the kingdom's psyche, an emblem of order through suffering. The fortress at Torun was now both a palace and a prison, where justice and fear existed as one. Yet behind the stillness of his empire, silence began to breed decay. The first sign appeared within his own council. Count Kazimierz, the king's cousin and commander of the army, questioned the morality of the cradle's continued use. He argued that obedience gained through terror was temporary, that a nation ruled by fear could not endure. Władysław dismissed him from office, declaring that hesitation was the seed of treason. From that day, even his most loyal generals spoke in whispers. In the following year, famine struck the northern provinces. Crops failed, and traders hesitated to transport grain, afraid of being accused of hoarding. The king's inspectors reported unrest in several towns. Instead of relief, Władysław sent soldiers. The Iron Cradle, once reserved for traitors, was now used on merchants accused of deceit. Its song of metal began to echo too often. The church finally acted. Bishop Andrzej of Krakow sent a formal decree condemning the cradle as an abomination against divine law. The bishop's letter, carried by royal couriers, was never answered. Days later, Andrzej was arrested for spiritual sedition. He vanished into the fortress, and within a week rumors spread that the bishop had been laid to rest in the king's iron womb. For the first time, rebellion grew from within the capital. Citizens who had once praised the Iron Crown now referred to Władysław as Żelazny Szaleniec, the Iron Madman. The nobility began secret correspondence with foreign rulers, seeking protection should the monarchy collapse. Władysław responded by tightening control. The streets of Krakow filled with guards, curfews were enforced. The kingdom appeared orderly, yet the fear had turned inward. Jan Dzierżonowski, the royal engineer, became the final voice of conscience. Unable to bear his creation's legacy, he entered the fortress at night and attempted to destroy the last cradle. He was caught before he could finish the act. When the guards presented him to Władysław, the king ordered that Dzierżonowski be placed inside the very machine he had built. Witnesses claimed that as the cradle rocked, the king looked away for the first time. That moment marked the beginning of his unraveling. The machine, once a symbol of his control, had consumed the man who gave it life. Władysław withdrew from public view, shutting himself within the fortress halls. For months, decrees were issued in his name, but sealed by trembling scribes. When soldiers finally entered his chambers in 1535, they found the Iron Cradle still rocking gently in the dim light. Inside it lay the king himself. No one knew whether his death was suicide or punishment by those he had ruled. His reign ended as it had been lived, in silence, precision, and iron. The fortress of Torun was sealed, and the Iron Cradle was buried beneath its stones, never seen again. But its memory endured, a testament to the belief that order built on suffering cannot last forever.